Hey family, last time I did a video about how I did my RN NCLEX 2 times before I passed finally on my third try. On this video, I'm going to talk about what I ultimately did different to ensure I did not fail a third time. I literally took 4 simple steps to get myself ready for the RN NCLEX and ensure that I actually passed this time around. I scheduled the test date for starters. I made sure I had a firm date already scheduled, which was open to rescheduling if I needed more time. I also made a study plan that I really stuck to even when I really didn't want to. I actually developed a plan for the entire month that I took off, week by week, day by day plan, and well, almost hour by hour, but I just made sure that I treated it like a job. And between 8 and 5, I was just on the grind all day long. Now, some people may or may not be able to do that, but I personally treated it like a job. Like I literally took 9 to 5 and made sure that I just dedicated that to this plan that I already scheduled. I also made sure I ate well. I made sure I slept well, rested well. I also did a gajillion practice questions. I feel like I did so many questions until I could not do any more questions. So when I failed my NCLEX 2 times, I knew I had to do something differently so I don't have to fail a third time and have to attempt again. When you find yourself in this self-defeating state when you fail, they tell you to pick up and keep going, but it's really not that easy. You feel really beat down. So I was determined to make sure that I passed this time around. I knew if I failed a third time, I would have had to take a board-approved remediation program before I could take my NCLEX a 4th time. And I was determined not to do that. Technically, you have 6 attempts to pass your NCLEX in total, at which point some states require you to either do a refresher or go back to nursing school altogether. The refresher course, I was pretty open to it, but going back to nursing school, that was a beast going to nursing school the first time around. So I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot do that again. It was not the easiest thing to do. That was arguably one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life, is to go to nursing school, because it required a lot of attention to detail, it took a lot of time. Like you literally felt like you had no life out of school. So it was, I didn't see myself going back to school for a whole program again. So I had to make sure I passed this time around. NCLEX uses a computer adaptive testing, which really just means that no 2 tests are identical. The computer algorithm produces each question based on your performance on the previous question. Therefore, with each answer, the difficulty of your questions get bumped a notch higher, and vice versa. If you fail that question, the difficulty of the following question gets bumped a notch lower. Now, I used to hear, I don't know if it's a myth or a truth, back in the day, I wouldn't advise to do that because a lot of people have said that doesn't work, but I used to hear that some people, what they would do is the very first few questions of the NCLEX, they would purposefully choose the wrong answer so the NCLEX can actually bump the difficulty of the questions lower. And then the NCLEX is not so difficult. But the problem with that is those questions could be critical because if, let's say, the exam was going to give you only 75 questions and you already purposefully failed or made sure you failed the first 5 questions or 15 questions, whatever, however amount of questions, you might actually make yourself fail the entire test because the questions that could have been your saving grace, you actually made sure you failed them. But this bumping the questions up a notch or down a notch really is to test your peak capabilities or your peak knowledge. So when you answer a question incorrectly, the computer automatically chooses an easier question. And if you answer that question correctly, it chooses a slightly more difficult question. Therefore, through the exam, the computer really bumps up your next question based on your previous question. For instance, if you got this question correct, it will bump up your next question. If you get it wrong, it will bump down the next question. And that's going to be throughout the exam, which is why that idea of making sure you answer the first few questions incorrectly may not work, because really every question is based on the previous question, if you are correct or if you are wrong. So if you're correct, it will bump your next question up, the level of difficulty a little bit up. If you're wrong, it's going to bump the level of difficulty down. So fast forward to the topic of today. I had already been a licensed vocational nurse for years before I decided to go on to being a registered nurse. And when you've already been a licensed vocational nurse, in some other states call it a licensed practical nurse, or initials are LVN or LPN, it makes it so difficult actually to transition to be an RN. Well, not really transition in the work sense, but to transition NCLEX. Why? So if you've already been a nurse already, a licensed vocational nurse or a licensed practical nurse, in my personal opinion, the RN NCLEX is a lot more difficult, as you may have to actually unlearn or relearn new things, but you may actually have to unlearn some old habits that you've picked up over the years as a licensed vocational nurse that you may need to drop as an RN, or relearn them the correct way. Because truth be told, sometimes you find most of us nurses, you have 8 hours or 12 hours in a shift, but we find creative shortcuts or ways to do things that, get us to the desired result, but we may take shortcuts to get there. It doesn't mean it's wrong, it doesn't mean it's illegal, it's just we are trying to get there the fastest way and the safest way to take care of all these patients that we have to in this short amount of time, and still have to document the entire shift work that you've done the entire shift. Now, I'm not saying that the shortcuts that some of us take are bad or illegal. It's just that some of those shortcuts are going to be a choice in the answers to the questions in the RN NCLEX. And since you're already used to practicing these shortcuts, you will think that is the correct answer. But per the RN question that you're being asked, that is not the correct answer. Because what the RN NCLEX mostly, well, from what I understand, most of the answers rather in the RN NCLEX, most of the answers are correct. But the test wants to determine if you can tell which is the most correct. That was the most confusing thing to me, because everything, or well, on most questions, almost all the answers, or all the answers were correct, but which is the most correct? I personally fell prey to this on a few questions, because again, I was a seasoned nurse already, and I had a lot of shortcuts that I had learned along the way. Especially the first time I took the RN NCLEX, I was able to recognize after the fact a lot of the answers that I gave that were kind of influenced by my experience as an LVN, which was not necessarily the most correct answers. So anyway, when I personally was taking my RN NCLEX, I had two major things that were stacked up against me. I feel like I was already a seasoned LVN, and I already had picked up a lot of shortcuts along the way and a lot of, get there quick methods. And the second thing was I was testing like 3 years after I'd already completed my RN program. And everything that I had learned through nursing school was not necessarily very fresh in my memory. But I also had this big ego that, well, I guess I graduated almost at the top of my class, if not the top of my class. So, nursing school was the most difficult thing I've ever done. NCLEX can be that difficult. So I was very, very ill prepared the first time I went to take the NCLEX, because I was just walking in there by faith, and I'm telling you guys, faith is not going to make you pass that NCLEX. You have to practice, because clearly the faith did not make me pass that NCLEX the first time round. Well, or the second time round, even if I was a little bit better prepared the second time. So lesson learned. But anyway, so here are the steps I eventually took after failing the NCLEX. First thing I did in preparation was I took a review course. I used Hearst Review, and I picked Hearst Review after looking at many others, but mainly because when I was in licensed vocational nursing school, we used ATT for our test out, for our test out exam, and I was not necessarily crazy with the preparation questions, and I just did not like the structure of the ATT. It felt a little bit difficult to me to understand. I mean, again, I did pass my LVN NCLEX on the first try regardless, but I still thought that ATT was a little bit more difficult to understand. And then the second one, I kind of argued myself against was the Kaplan, because in my RN program, we also used the Kaplan. And I mean, I loved it, but I also still felt like it was a lot more like the ATT. It was a little bit difficult to understand. And I mean, I did not need difficult because I had already been through a difficult program. I needed something that would bring everything full circle, like just kind of like put everything that I know, into perspective, or more perspective at that point. So I read a lot of reviews about the HAST review. I had a friend who had a HAST review book, and I looked through it a little bit. I was like, I think this looks like something I could do actually. So I picked the HAST review by eliminating the two that I already did. And also I kind of had a glimpse into what to expect with the HAST review if I were to purchase my own HAST review course per se. Now, some people use private tutors to help with the NCLEX preparation, but in my case, I drove 4 hours from Dallas to Houston because that is the only place at the time when I was very ready to take this NCLEX and get prepared for this NCLEX. They only had availabilities for classes in Houston. Now, they would have some in Dallas as well here and there, but the dates were too far out, and I'd already booked my NCLEX date, and I was determined to do it on the date that I had chosen, even if I could have changed it if I really needed to. But I decided to just get in my car and drive 4 hours to Houston and spend 5 days in a hotel and just go for the HAST review. I mean, I was ready at that point to fly to a whole different state to even take this HAST review because I was that ready. And I was that ready to not fail, and I was that ready to take the exam as well. So I would have really flown to a whole other state if I had to. So quick rundown. With the HAST review package that I got, and I don't know if they still do that today, but with the HAST review package that I got, we got 1 paperback book. We got 5 intense days of live review with a live instructor from HAST, and she would go page by page and refresh our memory of all the things we learned in nursing school, and made it so interactive and so fun to actually remember these things and do some pop quizzes and practice questions and stuff. It was actually fun. I was like, I wish the NCLEX was this fun, but it was really, really fun. It was very engaging. Like, we were able to ask questions and practice some of those test questions in class as well. She provided us with a lot of critical thinking material, activities, practical quizzes, and I really felt, out of all the reviews that I had dabbled in, that this actually really taught me how to critical think. And I still am able today to critical think based on that. And it just kind of wowed me that the entire time I took my my nursing program, it just took that one review to kind of bring it all full circle. And I feel like I got out of that program, that 5-day program, a lot better at critical thinking. It was the weirdest feeling, actually. I left feeling like this review literally in 5 short days had me thinking like a practicing nurse already, who was already practicing in the field with a few years, of practice. I just remember clearly when I was testing after the HAST review, when I was taking the test, I just remember in Pearson VUE, I remember while I was taking the test, feeling like I had a live patient in front of me, and I could picture that instructor that we had with the HAST review, like walking me through what I need to check out first, what I needed to take care of first, what is going to hurt the patient most so we can get that out of the way and take care of it first. Like, I could see myself like literally taking care of that patient live, even though I was just taking a test. It was that interactive. I really, really, really enjoyed the HAST review, especially the live session. Well, and later, of course, I ended up enjoying I just enjoyed the entire thing, but I enjoyed the live session because, you know, you were interacting with people, other students in the class, the instructors and stuff like that. So it was really, really nice. So when the 5 days was said and done, and I had already gone back home to Dallas from Houston, I purchased an add-on to the original HAST review called the HAST Elevate. I believe it was about $99. And that was literally the icing on the cake. And I feel like that $99 might have actually ensured that I actually passed my NCLEX. That was the best $99 ever spent. And I know I said that the interactive part of the class with the instructors was my favorite part of the HAST review. But honestly, I think the HAST Elevate was hands down my favorite part of the whole review. And what the HAST Elevate essentially is, it's an intense guide that goes with the HAST review itself. So there's the book that we got, there's the 5-day instructor situation that we got, and then the HAST Elevate is an addition to the 2 other things that we already have. And the way it's structured much like a subscription, where when you pay that $99, you have access to the HAST Elevate for 90 days. So the first step, I took the HAST review for my RN NCLEX. Now on to the second step. I took an entire month off of work to concentrate, and that was just in addition to the 5 or 7 actually days that I took off to go to Houston, do the 5 days of in-class HAST review, and then of course drive back to Dallas. As soon as I got home from Houston, I went directly to Pearson VUE website and booked a date for the NCLEX. That was almost exactly a month away from the day that I was booking the test. I did this to motivate myself and also to make myself know that I had to be ready by the day that I was gonna take the test. I mean, I knew I could change the actual testing day, but I kept checking in with myself and re-evaluating myself to see if, that day was still good, or did I need to reschedule that day. And I did this checking in by doing the RN NCLEX style questions on my HAST Elevate, the subscription I talked about, and ensuring that I got passing scores on the questions that they were giving out consistently. And occasionally, when I was actually tired of all that intense studying, I would actually pick up a shift or 2, even if I told myself I wouldn't go to work. Honestly, I've always been a workaholic. So I was like, what a better way to, de-stress than to maybe go pick up a shift. My job was not very physically demanding, but I would either go pick up a shift or go do something fun, like go to the movies or just, hang out with a friend. But honestly, I could count on one hand how many times I did that, probably about 2 or 3 times, because I was so determined. I think I had so much adrenaline in me, and I just had to get ready for this NCLEX, and I had to walk into that NCLEX feeling like I was ready, even if I may not have been ready, but I had to feel that I was ready to get in that testing room. The third thing I did was I developed a foolproof plan of how I was going to study that entire month. I broke it down to what my goals were going to be the entire month, and then I broke it down to what my goals were week by week, since I had only 4 weeks. And then I broke it down to day by day. Now, the day by day goals were a little bit harder to achieve than the week by week. And looking back, I could have done every other day by every other day, because I put so much pressure on me to accomplish a few things, or whatever amount of things that I was going to accomplish every day. And I had to actually reevaluate my plan a few days into it, because the day by day that I had set was too stringent on me, and I was having a hard time keeping up with my own schedule. So I slightly had to tweak it a little bit. But overall, I just made a plan for how I'm gonna get all this studying that I needed to do in a month, and then I broke it down into weekly, bits, and then also into daily or every other day bits as well. And what made it easy for me to be able to execute on my study plan, my foolproof study plan, I don't know if it was foolproof, but on my foolproof study plan, was I decided to just go with one NCLEX review program. I didn't want to confuse myself. I didn't want to give myself too many things to compare. And I was just like, look, I'm just going to take one tested and proven review program, and I will stick to that one. Because what I found, and just from talking to a lot of my friends who use 2 or 3, and a lot of people they use 2 or 3, but some people they kind of used 2 or 3 that had very different learning styles or teaching styles, and it was very confusing. And you feel like you just went back to square one. Like, I just needed something that was not going to confuse me, and I was going to stick to one and practice it and perfect it and just go by that way of thinking. And then when I really, really grasp it, I can maybe, veer into other ways, but I didn't need to veer into other review programs, because this one program I felt like actually grounded me more than any other review programs that I'd ever dabbled in at all. So the fun part, for my study schedule, I finally decided to settle on, first thing was read the entire paperback book that we had got, because remember we had a few things with the HAST review package. For me, I had the 5 days of live review with an instructor, and then there they gave us a paperback HAST review book, and then we did have access to the Q-Bank questions with the HAST review, which gives you a bunch of questions, a bunch of NCLEX questions that you can practice with. And then when I got home, I also purchased the HAST Elevate, which was the addition subscription that I told you about. So the first thing that I did was read the paperback book front to back, page by page, backtracking. In the live instructional that we got at HAST Review in Houston, we went from the first page to the last page with the instructor there. Like, we did the whole book in that entire 5 days. And then when I got home, I decided to go over the book again without really concentrating too much, like kind of like a novel, not really concentrating on anything particular, just reading through it. The second step, I went back again and started on the same book, and I started reading each chapter and topic, like, to a good understanding. Like, I would take my time and concentrate on actually reading and understanding the chapters, and I just made sure I understood each chapter very, very well before I would move on to the next chapter. And then the third thing, I went back again and started to read the chapters again from scratch, but this time I would read a chapter and take the corresponding NCLEX style exam questions on the Q-Bank. And then the fourth thing I did, after I finished all the chapters and all the corresponding, well, not all, but most of the corresponding Q-Bank questions, NCLEX questions, I now started to do the HAST Elevate module by module by module. Point of correction, when I got home and scheduled Pearson VUE test, I did not buy the HAST Elevate immediately, because I would have kind of wasted some of my 60 days that I had. So I waited until I read the paperback book, until I felt like I understood enough to actually go in and practice what I've read in the HAST Elevate. Now, when I got to the HAST Elevate, it's a little bit more compact than the actual paperback book. And I did the same exact thing that I did with the paperback book. I did the webinars or modules that were available, and also did the corresponding NCLEX style test quizzes. By then, I realized I did not have to redo too many of the quizzes or tests, because at that point, I'd already mastered how to answer some of these questions, how to critical think, and I was actually answering most of the quizzes and tests questions correctly consecutively. And this was the most fun, and also it was very interactive for me. So I read the entire HAST paperback book loosely. I read each topic or chapter to my best understanding. I read each chapter again to a good understanding again, and also did the NCLEX style test questions on the Q bank that corresponded with the chapters I was on. And then I did the Hearst Elevate modules and also the corresponding NCLEX style questions that went with it. So I already took the NCLEX review course, the Hearst review course. I already took the entire month off. I already developed my foolproof study plan. And on to the fourth and last step that I did was make sure that all through the entire month of studying, I made sure to take a lot of breaks to make it through the day. I made sure I was getting enough sleep, which is not usually difficult for me, and especially since I wasn't working, I made sure to get enough sleep. And I did so many questions. It really must have been about 4,000 or 5,000 questions. I mean, it could have been anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 questions, but they were coming out of my pores, those questions. I did so many practice questions. I don't think I've ever done as many questions as I did on that, in that entire 1 month to practice and get ready for this NCLEX. And interestingly, actually, I had read somewhere that you should stay away from coffee because it kind of makes you tired. And I was a coffee drinker. I would drink like 5 cups of coffee every morning before I even get started on anything. And that was kind of difficult to me, but I was determined. So I cut off the coffee, cold turkey. Well, and thanks to that, I don't drink coffee actually anymore. I mean, I will have the occasional cup of coffee, but I don't depend on coffee to exist anymore. I also read to keep up the positive affirmations. And believe you me, every morning I would say, I got this. I got this. I got this. I've never been too much of a positive affirmation type of person. So really all I had on my bathroom mirror was, I got this, I got this, I got this, and I got this. And that is how I aced my RN NCLEX, even with the challenges that I had stacked against me, being a seasoned licensed vocational nurse already. Okay, to recap, I scheduled a date to take the NCLEX. I took a whole month off from work. I developed a study plan for the entire month with the main plan of using one review program, which was the Hearst review that I used. I ate well, I rested well, and I took a lot of breaks through the entire month, and I did a lot of questions while I was practicing. See you in the next one.